In 1893, workers repairing a collapsed sewer tunnel beneath Whitechapel made an unsettling discovery. Deep in the darkness, they found a makeshift dwelling, a pile of rags, stolen candles, and the gnawed bones of rats. But the person who lived there had vanished into the maze of tunnels before they could catch him. The newspapers called him the Phantom of the Sewers. But who was this man who chose to live beneath London streets? And how did a young dock worker become one of the city's most elusive underground dwellers? We're about to uncover his story. But first, if you enjoy these journeys into the past, please don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to support the channel. It really helps us bring more of these hidden histories to light. Our first glimpse of him comes from the 1871 census of England and Wales. Here in Whitechapel, in the heart of London's East End, we find a Thomas Welch. He's just 8 years old, living in a cramped tenement at number 12 Dorset Street, one of the most notorious streets in all of London. The household is crowded and chaotic. His father, William Welch, aged 36, is listed as a dock laborer. His mother, Mary Welch, aged 34, has no occupation listed, which typically meant she took in washing or did piecework at home. There are 5 children in total. Thomas is the middle child with 2 older sisters, Elizabeth aged 12 and Sarah aged 10, and 2 younger brothers, William Jr. aged 5 and baby James aged 2. The father was born in Stepney, while the mother came from Bethnal Green. Both parents were born within a mile of where they now live, as was young Thomas himself. This tells us the family is deeply rooted in the East End, part of that vast population that rarely moved beyond the docks and warehouses that dominated their world. The Welch family lived in what Charles Booth would later map as a black zone on his poverty map, the very darkest category, denoting the lowest class, vicious, and semi-criminal. Dorset Street itself would gain infamy as the worst street in London. As a working-class boy in the East End, Thomas's future seemed predictable. He would follow his father to the docks, and indeed that's exactly what happened. But the path would take a dark turn that no one could have predicted. 10 years later, the 1881 census shows us a family beginning to fracture. William Welch Sr. is now listed as a widower. Mary has died sometime in the previous decade, though we cannot find a death certificate that definitively matches her. In the East End, where poverty and disease were constant companions, such deaths were tragically common and often poorly recorded. The household at Dorset Street has changed. William Sr., now 46, still works at the docks. Living with him are his sons, William Jr., now 15 and working as a porter, and James, aged 12, listed as a general laborer. But where is Thomas? At 18 years old, he should be here, working alongside his father and brothers. Instead, we find him listed separately, just streets away, as a lodger at number 7 Flower and Dean Street, another infamous Whitechapel address. His occupation is given as a rat catcher. This is significant. Rat catching was considered one of the lowest occupations, barely above begging. It was dangerous, filthy work that took men into the darkest corners of London. The sewers, the basements, the warehouse cellars where rats bred in their millions. The work attracted those who couldn't hold regular employment, men who were comfortable in the dark and the filth. Why has Thomas separated from his family at such a young age? Why has he chosen or been forced into this particular trade? The census gives us no answers. only this stark fact. While his brothers work respectably at the docks, Thomas has descended into the city's literal underworld. But it's in 1883 that we get our first glimpse of Thomas in the newspapers, and the story is troubling. The East London Observer reports on a case at Thames Magistrates' Court. The headline reads simply, "Theft at the Docks." A young man named Thomas Welch, aged 20, described as a rat catcher, was charged with stealing a coil of rope valued at 3 shillings from the London docks. The prosecutor stated that the accused had been seen by a watchman climbing over a wall with the rope concealed under his coat. Thomas's defense, given in his own words, was that he had found the rope discarded and believed it to be refuse. The magistrate was unimpressed. He noted that this was a common excuse among dock thieves, and that the rope was clearly valuable property, not rubbish. Thomas was sentenced to 1 month's hard labor at Pentonville Prison. This first conviction marks the beginning of a pattern. It also reveals something important. Thomas had access to the docks, was familiar with their layout, knew how to move unseen. Skills perhaps learned from his father and brothers, but now turned to criminal purpose. What happens next? We search the records for 1884 and 1885, expecting to find Thomas back with his family, or at least traceable through the London directories. But he seems to vanish. There are no census records between 1881 and 1891, but we do find scattered newspaper reports that begin to build a disturbing picture. In March 1886, the Illustrated Police News carries a small notice under the heading, "Curious Case at Shadwell." It reports that police, investigating complaints about theft from a warehouse cellar, discovered evidence of someone living in the space, bedding made from sacking, food scraps, and remarkably, the remains of dozens of rats, apparently killed and partially consumed. The occupant had fled before police arrived, escaping through what was described as a cunningly concealed opening into the sewer system. No name is given, but the location is just streets from where Thomas Welch was last recorded. Then, in November 1887, another report, this time from the Evening Standard. The headline is sensational. "The Sewer Dweller." It describes how workers cleaning a blocked drain near Whitechapel Road broke through into a larger tunnel and found a man living there. He was described as wild in appearance, covered in filth, and speaking in an incoherent manner. When they tried to apprehend him, he fled deeper into the tunnel system with remarkable agility and knowledge of the passages. The man was never caught. The workers reported finding evidence of a long-term habitation, stolen candles, tools, and what they described as a veritable graveyard of rat bones. Is this Thomas Welch? We cannot be certain from these reports alone, but the location, the method, and the timing all align with his known whereabouts and occupation. The 1891 census should provide us with answers. This is where we would expect to find Thomas, now 28 years old, either with his family or in lodgings somewhere in the East End. But Thomas Welch does not appear in the 1891 census, not in Whitechapel, not in Stepney, not in any workhouse or prison that we can locate. For census purposes, he has become invisible, one of London's hidden population who slipped through the bureaucratic net. His father, William, is still alive, now 56, still working at the docks, still living in Whitechapel. His brother, William Jr., is there, now 25 and married with a child. His brother James is there too, 22 and working as a docker. But Thomas is nowhere to be found in any official record. This absence is itself telling. Men disappeared from the census for several reasons. They were at sea, they were transient and missed by enumerators, or they were deliberately avoiding official registration. Given what we know of Thomas, the latter seems most likely. However, the newspapers continue to track the strange phenomenon of the sewer dweller, and the reports become more frequent and more detailed. In June 1892, the Star newspaper runs a substantial article titled "London's Underground Mystery." It reports that over the past 5 years there have been numerous sightings of a man living in the sewer and tunnel systems beneath the East End. The article interviews several witnesses. A sewer worker named Albert Grimshaw states that he has encountered the man on at least 3 occasions. He describes him as a thin fellow, quick as lightning, with eyes that shine in the dark like a cat's. Grimshaw claims the man seems to know the tunnel system better than those of us who work there. A night watchman at a warehouse near Cable Street reports that the man has been stealing food from the loading docks for years. He comes up through a grating in the courtyard, takes what he needs, and vanishes back down before you can raise an alarm. We've tried to catch him, but it's impossible. He's like smoke. Most chillingly, the article includes testimony from a doctor at the London hospital. He states that several times over recent years, people living rough near the docks have reported being attacked at night by a wild man who emerges from the drains. The attacks have never been serious, mostly attempts to steal food or blankets, but the victims describe their attacker as more animal than man. The article speculates about who this person might be. Is he an escaped convict? A lunatic who fled an asylum? Or simply one of London's destitute, who has found a desperate solution to homelessness? The police are quoted as saying they have tried to locate this individual, but that the sewer system is too vast and complex. A man who knows those tunnels could hide there indefinitely, admits an inspector from H Division. Then, in February 1893, comes the incident that opened our story. The collapse in the sewer tunnel beneath Whitechapel and the discovery of the dwelling. The Times gives us a detailed account. Workers from the Metropolitan Board of Works were repairing a collapsed section of sewer near Commercial Street when they broke through into a small chamber that appeared to have been deliberately enlarged. Inside, they found what the report describes as a nest. There were piles of rags and sacking arranged as bedding, several stolen candles and matches, a collection of tools including a knife, a small hammer, and what appeared to be rat traps. Most disturbingly, there were bones everywhere, the skeletal remains of hundreds of rats, many showing signs of having been cooked over a small fire. On the walls, someone had scratched marks, possibly a calendar or counting system. There were also crude drawings, which the workers found disturbing. One foreman described them as pictures of the tunnels, like maps, showing ways through the darkness that we didn't even know existed. The police were called, and they searched the surrounding tunnel system. They found several other chambers connected by narrow passages, all showing signs of habitation. It was clear that someone had been living down there for a considerable time, moving between different locations. But the occupant had vanished. Despite a thorough search involving nearly 20 officers, no one was found. The tunnel system, they realized, was far more extensive than their maps showed. There were old Victorian tunnels, medieval culverts, and even older passages, all interconnected in ways that no official plan recorded. One police sergeant made an ominous observation in his report. The individual in question has created his own city beneath our city. He could remain hidden indefinitely if he chooses. The newspapers seized upon the story. For weeks, there were reports and speculation. The Illustrated Police News ran an artist's dramatic rendering of the sewer phantom's lair, showing a wild-eyed man crouching in a candle-lit tunnel surrounded by rats. But who was this man? The police had no identification, no name. The mystery seemed unsolvable. Until September 1893, when we find a crucial document in the records of Thames Magistrates' Court. It's a charge sheet, and it provides our answer. The prisoner is listed as Thomas Welch, aged 30. Occupation unknown, no fixed abode. He is charged with theft of food from a warehouse on Ratcliffe Highway and with resisting arrest. But it's the description that confirms his identity. He is recorded as being 5 feet 6 inches tall, thin build, with brown hair and distinctive scars on both hands. Described as consistent with rat bites. The arresting officer's testimony is remarkable. Police Constable Henry Morrison states that he apprehended the accused emerging from a drain grating near the warehouse at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. The accused was carrying stolen bread and cheese. When challenged, Welch attempted to flee back down the drain, but Morrison grabbed him. According to the testimony, Welch fought with extraordinary strength and desperation, and repeatedly tried to bite the officer. It took 3 constables to finally restrain him. Morrison's description of Welch is disturbing. He states that the prisoner was in a deplorable condition, covered in filth, his clothing in rags, and smelling abominably of the sewers. More significantly, Morrison notes that Welch seemed barely able to speak coherently and appeared unaccustomed to daylight, squinting and covering his eyes. The magistrate's report provides even more detail. When asked to give an account of himself, Thomas Welch could barely speak. The court recorder noted that his voice was hoarse and rasping, as if long unused to conversation. When asked where he lived, Welch simply pointed downward and said, "Below." The magistrate pressed him. How long had he been living in the sewers? Welch seemed confused by the question. He held up his fingers several times, trying to count, then gave up and simply said, "Long time, many winters." When asked why he lived this way, Welch's answer was recorded as follows: "Safer down there. Nobody bothers you. The rats don't judge." The court struggled with what to do with him. This was not a simple case of theft. The magistrate ordered that Welch be examined by a doctor to determine his fitness to stand trial. The medical report, filed 3 days later, makes for grim reading. Dr. Edmund Fletcher examined Welch at the court's holding cells. His report states that the prisoner was severely malnourished, his skin discolored and showing evidence of prolonged exposure to damp conditions. Fletcher noted extensive scarring on Welch's hands and arms, consistent with numerous rat bites over an extended period. More concerning was Welch's mental state. Fletcher wrote, "The prisoner appears to have lost much of his facility for normal human interaction. He is deeply uncomfortable in lit spaces and repeatedly asked to be returned to darkness. His eyes have adapted to subterranean conditions to such a degree that normal daylight causes him considerable pain." Fletcher concluded, "While I cannot say with certainty that the prisoner is legally insane, he has clearly suffered profound psychological deterioration. Years of isolation in the most abject conditions have reduced him to a near feral state. He appears to have more in common with the creatures he lived among than with his fellow men." The magistrate, faced with this report, sentenced Thomas Welch to 6 months' imprisonment at Pentonville, with a recommendation that he receive medical treatment and that attempts be made to rehabilitate him for return to society. But prison records tell us that rehabilitation was impossible. The governor's log from Pentonville contains several entries about prisoner Thomas Welch. In October 1893, just weeks after his incarceration, there's a note. Prisoner Welch continues to refuse to sleep in his cell. He has been found multiple times sleeping beneath his bunk, pressed against the wall. He hoards food and shows extreme distress when in the exercise yard during daylight hours. In November, another entry. Prisoner Welch attacked by fellow inmates who object to his uncleanliness and strange behaviors. He has been placed in isolation for his own protection. Blessings. And in December, a final entry that is both tragic and telling. Prisoner Welch discovered attempting to dig through the floor of his cell with a spoon. When questioned, he stated he was trying to get back down where I belong. He appears to have no desire to return to surface life. Thomas Welch was released in March 1894, having served his full sentence. The prison chaplain's final report states, "I have attempted on numerous occasions to counsel this unfortunate man, but he shows no interest in spiritual guidance or in changing his circumstances. He has repeatedly stated his intention to return to the tunnels upon release. I fear for his immortal soul, but I fear more that he is already lost to the world of men." And return to the tunnels he did. Within a week of his release, there are reports of renewed sightings of the sewer dweller in Whitechapel. The police made no serious effort to recapture him. What would be the point? He had committed no serious crime, and the cost of keeping him in prison was considerable for what amounted to petty theft. Over the next few years, Thomas Welch became something of an East End legend. Children were warned not to play near drain grates, lest the rat man reach up and pull them down. Workers in the tunnels claimed to hear him moving through the darkness, and some left food for him, a kind of offering to the spirit of the underworld. In 1897, we find an extraordinary interview in the Pall Mall Gazette with a sewer worker named Joseph Kemp, who claimed to have befriended Thomas Welch. According to Kemp, he had encountered Welch numerous times during his work, and had gradually earned his trust by leaving food and not attempting to raise the alarm. Kemp describes Welch as a gentle soul, despite his appearance. He claims Welch showed him secret passages through the tunnel system and explained how he survived. He catches rats with traps he's made himself. Sometimes he steals from the docks or from warehouse yards, but only what he needs. He's got hiding places all over, chambers where he keeps his things. He knows every tunnel, every drain, every culvert in the East End. He's like a king down there, in his own kingdom. When Kemp asked why he lived this way, Welch's answer was simple. "Up there I was nothing. Down here I'm free." The interview caused a sensation, with some readers expressing sympathy for Welch and others condemning him as a dangerous vagrant. The London County Council made noises about clearing the sewers of unauthorized inhabitants, but nothing came of it. The tunnel system was simply too vast, too complex. The 1901 census arrives, and once again Thomas Welch is nowhere to be found in any official record. He would be 38 years old now. His father, William, has died sometime in the late 1890s. His brothers have moved away from Whitechapel, seeking better prospects elsewhere. Thomas has become completely disconnected from his family, from society, from the surface world entirely. He has achieved a kind of invisibility that few people ever attain, living literally beneath the city, but utterly apart from it. Newspaper reports of the Rat Man continue sporadically. In 1903, the Daily Mail runs a piece about London's urban myths and includes a section on the Whitechapel sewer dweller. They interview several people who claim to have seen him. A shopkeeper near Cable Street says, "I've seen him twice now, late at night. He comes up through a grating in the alley, takes vegetables from my rubbish bin, and vanishes. He's like a ghost, only he's real." In 1907, there's a report of a peculiar incident at the London hospital. A man was brought in suffering from severe rat bites and infection. He was delirious with fever and kept insisting he needed to get back down. The hospital staff believed he might be the legendary Rat Man, but by the time they thought to contact the police, he had disappeared from the ward. A nurse reported that she saw him escaping through a basement window. "He moved like an animal," she said, "quick and desperate." The 1911 census provides us with one final possible sighting in the official record. In the Whitechapel workhouse, we find a man listed only as Thomas W., surname unknown, approximately 48 years old. His occupation is given as none, and there's a note in the margin. Vagrant found collapsed near Commercial Street. Refuses to give full details. Appears to have been living rough for extended period. Could this be Thomas Welch? The age matches almost perfectly. The location is right. The circumstances fit. But frustratingly, the record provides no further information. The man was apparently given medical treatment and a bed for several weeks, then discharged himself against medical advice. The workhouse master's log contains one tantalizing entry from April 1911. The vagrant Thomas departed this morning without permission. When staff went to his bed, they found he had scratched words into the wall beside it. The words read, "The darkness is better. The rats are honest." After 1911, the trail goes completely cold. There are no more newspaper reports, no more sightings, no more records of any kind that we can definitively link to Thomas Welch. But the legend persists. Throughout the 1910s and even into the 1920s, there are occasional stories of strange encounters in the East End tunnels. Workers report finding dwelling places, bones, evidence of human habitation in the deepest, darkest places beneath London streets. In 1923, during expansion work on the underground, laborers broke through into an old Victorian sewer tunnel that was not on any modern map. Inside, they found skeletal remains. The bones were surrounded by rat skeletons, candle stubs, and a collection of small tools and metal scraps. The coroner's report is brief. The remains were of an adult male, approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, dead for several years. The cause of death could not be determined, but the coroner noted that the man appeared to have died where he lay, in the darkness, surrounded by the evidence of a life lived entirely underground.